Well, this is Kal Kat, the Kal Katster, and this is the unofficial review of Creature Features. And tonight's episode was The Creation of the Humanoids, a 1962 movie featuring a guy from Plan 9 from Outer Space and some other classic people from that time period. It clearly inspired a bunch of later stuff, but they were probably all inspired by the same Artur Isaac Asimov. And it is a slightly better movie than Will Smith's I, Robot. But I didn't say it's good. I'd say it's just slightly better. And very similar to Bicentennial Man. And, well, in some ways, it's a robot. Yeah, so we have, the premise of the movie is after World War III, the nuclear war, World War III, the human race is dying because nobody can reproduce, or it's like 2% or something. And so the humans have built robots to replace them. And the robots are gaining in technology and stuff, but they have the 3 laws of robotics. Somebody pointed out in the thread 4. There aren't 4. The 4th one was added in the non-canon books after Asimov's death. So they're not canon. There's 3. In this story, the 4th one just says don't disobey the others. So it's not really stupid. So we have. It was actually really dull, the movie. It was clearly a metaphor for a minority group that's misunderstood. Either the minority group could be, at the time, African American or Asian or homosexuals or different people, and it's a thinly veiled civil rights thing going on because it was the 60s. Why not? However, it was that via the use of copious amounts of drugs, which made the producers do some pretty weird stuff. There's a central antagonist character who's our main character, who is fascist and bigoted and doesn't want his sister dating a robot. Even though, so the twist is going to be like really obvious. You know, somebody's going to end up he's going to end up dating a robot. Right. So everybody in it acts like a robot. So it's going to end up dating a robot. Well, the twist is, because we can give it away, it's from the 60s. The twist ending is that he is actually the robot, and so is the girlfriend. They're both robots. So he was bigoted against himself, not realizing that he was just an advanced robot. If this seems similar to New Battlestar Galactica, I think he was a fan. I think Ronald Moore saw this story and he was a fan. It's absolutely the Cylon thing with the alternate universe thing, twist ending, everything. It's new BSG. It's also, William Gibson was also inspired by movies like this, or even this movie. Gene Roddenberry was really inspired by this. And the Robots of the Quester tapes is literally the same idea. The robots taking over. So even though it's really boring and pedantic, it does have messages about fascism and intolerance are bad. Racism is bad. Prejudice is bad. And the irony being that the prejudiced racist guy turns out that he actually is one of them the whole time. It's similar to that classic Star Trek episode with the man with black on one side and white on the other on their faces, and they were fighting because one side had it on the left and one on the right. And there was Star Trek was ahead of its time. Only 2 years later, when they filmed the pilot, The Cage, and then followed by the original series in 1966. The Cage was 64. So Star Trek followed on that. The synths from Star Trek Picard are clearly modeled after, not Data, but these guys from this movie. They're supposed to be kind of Data-like, but they're not. At one point, they tried to take the arm off with the android. They thought it was. People were joking that it was his junk, but it was his arm. Which is similar to that scene in A Measure of a Man, TNG, a second season episode, with Data, who is an android. with Asimov's laws of robotics and positronic brain. The thalamus thing. They didn't want to call it a positronic brain. They probably should have. Although it's not literally positrons, because that would be an antimatter brain and it would go poof if it was in a human. Also similar to the work, this story, William Gibson later on went on to write all the Neuromancer books and all that, and the cyberpunk books stuff in the 80s and 70s and 80s, which inspired Ghost in the Shell and Akira and things like that. So it's, all this stuff cross-pollinated, and even though this movie was really boring, it inspired a whole lot of people in Hollywood and science fiction. It's also similar to the plot of Metropolis from 1933. It's loosely based on a story from the 20s, one of the first robot stories in the 20s. They made some allusions to there being artificial creatures in the Bible, but for the date, wasn't actually happened. And the twist ending is that they're, if you're watching this today, you're a machine, and we managed to reproduce and the machines, the 100 series, the Cylons, the Battlestar Galactica, the new one. A little bit of Star Wars in there, a little bit of Lucas. I also watched it. I'm surprised that Spielberg didn't do any of that stuff. The closest thing would be a Ready Player One, but that was more like a William Gibson thing. So I don't know. Thought that he never tackled that. Did he help out on iRobot? I think he might have helped out on that one. Yeah, that didn't work. Because iRobot, for this this movie, The Mutants, for the lack of a story in the movie, Isaac Asimov was always building a character study of things in the future. And his books tended to be not about characters, but about the story set in the future, like history, psychohistory, that kind of thing, set in the future. And so there wasn't a lot of character development in those stories. So the Will Smith Isaac iRobot was wrong because they put character development in it. And it didn't have that. I don't know how they're going to do this Foundation series this year. I don't know how they're going to do that. Because Harry Sheldon and the others are not characters. I mean, they kind of are, but they're archetypes. Although Foundation did inspire Dune. There was an article on there about that. And Galactic Empire type of thing. Which later inspired Star Wars. Frank Herbert's Dune was heavily... Star Wars was heavily influenced by that. Frank Herbert was heavily influenced by Asimov. There was a guy talking on there about that. It was like the laws of robotics and things. And it's like, yeah, they probably knew each other. The Dune saga is only like 10 years after the first Foundation book. So they knew each other. They knew each other. Yeah, it's like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis knew each other. They knew each other. They probably shared ideas. It wasn't copying. They shared ideas. Spielberg and Lucas, they even collaborated in the same way. Kal Kat and Mark's cards. Collaborating on things. Okay, so, yeah. Anyway, so I don't need to ramble on about the tonight's Creature Feature movie, except that it inspired a lot of stuff. It's called The Creation of the Humanoids. Sounds like an MST3K type of thing that they would have done. If they hadn't, I think they had. I had seen it before, so I got to see it again. So sometimes I'm picking the ones that I'd seen before. I had seen parts of it before, because I remember that, like, some of the characters and the goofy dialogue and the stuff. I think, it was on somewhere before, a late night show thing. Yeah, so, I remember the stilted dialogue and stuff. And humans already sounded like robots. They kind of gave away the ending in that they all sounded like they were machines. Because their dialogue was just bad. And they were trying to emote. Suddenly, I'm in love with you. Oh, there's this messed up part where they're like, they go in the robot ship, the temple. They got a base. I guess it's a base, yeah, it's a temple. The mother, father, and the base. The mother, father is clearly a trans character of some kind, a trans robot that's a mother and a father. Cool. That's ahead of its time too. Yeah. So cool. Yeah. So did that. The mother father. Yeah. So yeah, they go to the base and they tell the guy that the xenophobic guy that he's actually a robot after they stab him to prove that he's a robot, and green blood comes out. You know, green blood, of course. They had awesome contact lenses though, but imagine they kind of hurt because they were like these big giant metal contact lenses, and they couldn't see through them really. Because their eyes were getting all bloodshot from the drugs and the contacts. No, there wasn't a lot of psychedelic stuff. There should have been more. There should have been something going on. They complained about that. And the guest star was a famous drummer from a drummer guy who did a lot of gigs in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And apparently 70s and 80s, I guess it was, because he met Frank Zappa. So did the band guy. Frank Zappa said cool or something to his response to his, do you like my songs or not? Cool. Okay. That sounds like something. Sounds like something Frank would say. Back in the day. So, oh, that's good. I think it's what he said. Oh, that's good. Okay. But in songs, he's plenty wordy. He was plenty wordy. But yeah. So people are making lots of Frank Zappa jokes. Well, just me. I did mention some of the Frank Zappa songs in there, and Data, of course, with Yar, of course. The Quester tapes, I mentioned that. But yeah, other people mentioned. So that's pretty much it. I think I'm done because I don't need to ramble on about that. So yeah, so the creation of the humanoids is a film that exists from the 60s. Very cheesy, but not really in a fun way, except that it did inspire a lot of stuff. Yeah, so my point about the character development was that Asimov would have approved of this movie in the 60s because it is a character study. There's a lot of dialogue, and there's not a lot of action. So he probably kind of would have liked it. He would have been all, well, you kind of got it right, sort of. But yeah, so... But it's probably just like fans of Asimov that thought that it was like, it made sense, and Asimov might not have liked it, so I don't know. I could look it up, but I'm not gonna. You can look it up, fine. This has been Unofficial Creature Features. Not really official.